Myers, are you happy with us to record?
Sure, sure.
Sure. Okay. Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much. What a treat, an absolute treat to see you. So many of you I know, a lot I haven't met, and I got to tell you, it took me a bit to get. I got pretty emotional watching all those people introduce themselves. People had come back, people who were here. It really means a lot to see folks back on the path doing what we do and being able to help others. And it's a pretty special. For those I haven't met, my name is Myers Raymer. I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic from Central Texas. Kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it's such a treat to be here. I got sober January 15th, 88, and golly, it's just real special. The when they were asking me, Maya was asking me about a topic on this thing, and I said, are the promises real in the big book? Because I had just had a conversation with somebody who had said that they thought it was just sort of rhetorical stuff and they didn't really think that it was real. And I used to think exactly the same thing. So what I really wanted to talk about was this idea of how we get from one point, I'm brand new in the program, to a place to where we can lean into and understand what Bill Wilson in the first 100 intended for us to learn from the text. There's been a lot of movement over the years. Unfortunately, a lot of that movement has been away from the text and away from the big book, towards other deals. And I'm not here to rag on anybody. It's not beneficial in it, but it's something. Um, Somebody asked me one time. They said, "Myers, what's the worst period of your whole life?" And they thought I was going to lean into a story about my alcoholism. And the reality of that stuff was the worst period of my whole life was 7 years in AA, going to 6 meetings a week and not understanding what recovery looked like, not understanding what the bigger picture was. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of little dumpster fires just like me that are in these rooms that have been sober, quote unquote, one day at a time for years and years and years, and yet they are manifesting all kinds of weird, restless, irritable, and discontent on steroids. And so I always like to talk about it a little bit. It seems to make some people uncomfortable. However, there is a solution, and we're gonna talk about that. I'm not a big story fan, but I do want to talk specifically about some of that. I'm a trained professional. I'm going to watch my time real close like that, so we can have some time to visit. I want to make real clear something. When I talk about the big book, um, I've had people over the years that have called me and said, Myers, I get the impression that you want to turn everybody into big book thumpers, that, you're just kind of, listen, there was a time in my life, yes, when I first discovered the big book and the basic text, when I felt a little bit like I wanted to slap people up the head with a big book. And I was just kind of, uh, I just headed at it the wrong way. That's not my goal at all. But let me tell you, the stuff that we're going to talk about for a bit today, there's a huge gap. There's a huge space between this AA light, where if I just go to enough meetings, I'm going to be okay, and what the big book talked about, which was that we could stay sober for good and for all, and that we could recover from a hopeless state of mind and body. The stories and the illustrations and the reoccurring themes, the prayers, the promises, all of these things that were in the text, I never understood. I never understood it was there. So let me give you a real fast little deal. I got sober in January of '88. My twin brother Chris, had been trying to get sober for 7 years and couldn't get sober, and he finally fell in with some nice folks and he got sober. And he'd been sober 2 months, and he took me to my first AA meeting, and it was just just special. The dadgum room was full of the nicest people that I'd ever met, kind as they could be, and we about that time we went from having 7 meetings a week to 32 meetings a week. And I was doing everything I could to make every meeting I could get to. I could, and so I'm a little I don't know. The first couple of years was just the coolest thing in the whole wide world, and then somewhere between 2 and 3 years, I started getting kind of goofy, and I'm not working the steps. I don't have a sponsor, and I'm not blaming the group. I mean, their culture was, hey, let's have a bunch of meetings. That's fine. But there was other stuff that I should have been doing that I wasn't doing, and so I just started getting kind of crazy. And I know some of you have been there, and you can relate to what it's like to be not doing well, but be sober, and you're just struggling. And so it's funny. Years later, there was a guy that said, "Myers, didn't you recognize restless, irritable, and discontent? Didn't you recognize that you were moving sideways here?" And the answer to that is no. Because in order to recognize restless, irritable, and discontent, you have to understand the text. You have to understand what the big book's talking about on this thing. I think the goal is if I can just stay away from Canadian whiskey, I'm going to be okay. I'll be fine. And so imagine my surprise when all of a sudden I'm not okay. I mean, it's manifesting weird. I'm eating a half a gallon of Bluebell ice cream every night. We were talking about ice cream just a minute ago. Y'all got to come to Texas so y'all can get some of this stuff. I am 100% convinced that every night God sits in front of the TV somewhere eating ice cream, and Bluebell is it. It's just like, just saying. It's just like it's good stuff. Anyway, my face is I'm built like a jackrabbit. My dadgum face is getting real big, and I'm just like this. The I'm buying things I don't need. Any of y'all relate to that? I mean, I'm buying music I don't listen to. I'm buying clothes I don't wear. I'm buying toys and tools and all this. They used to call me Myers Raymer, the tool whore, because I was buying hundreds of tools that I didn't need. Guys, I took flying lessons after I learned how to stay sober for a little bit. The FAA is kind of funny about that. They want you to stay sober while you learn how to fly. I've never figured that one out. But anyway, I'm just I need an airplane, so I buy an airplane, and then a little bit later I buy another airplane, and then a little bit later, yep, you guessed it, I bought another one. Now I'm just saying, who needs three airplanes? I mean, it doesn't make sense, you see. And my wife, God love her, she's she's the smartest gal in the universe, and she would look at me across the room, and she would just go like this and go like, "Well, what are you doing, homeboy? Why are you spending all this money?" And the answer is, I don't really know. I don't really know. Everything seems to be set up to scratch that itch internally that's just kicking my rear end. And so I finally, I'm developing a bunch of anxiety disorder stuff in this sobriety, and I get that taken care of. And then all of a sudden, this depression comes back, and I can't function. I can't work. I can't. My wife and we're partners in a business, and I have 3 daughters that I adored, and yet I'm scaring the crap out of them because they don't know who's coming home from that A&A meeting. They don't understand the program. They don't understand me. They don't understand any of that stuff. And it's a contentious place to be. The Raymer household was a little weird, and 100% of it was because of me. So 2 weeks before I turned 7 in AA, I'm a suicidal mess. I don't know what's going to happen. And I end up calling Chris, my twin, and we had a conversation, and he said, I need to hook you up with this guy named Cliff Bishop in Dallas. Clifford's been dead for years now, but he was a big book guy. And I remember people in my home group used to go, "Oh no, you don't want to go to one of those big book things because no, anything but that." You see, everybody was against this stuff, and so, but I'm hopeless. I don't know what else to do, and so I call him. We have a conversation. He asked me to come and visit him, and I did. And then I stayed at that group. My plan was to stay and study the Big Book for 2 months at that group, And then I was going to go back to my original home group, and I was going to be a, kind of a AA nerd. I don't know. I'm just going to go back and carry some wisdom into that meeting, and I never did go back. I just stayed at that meeting and found that there was an amazing plus for going to these meetings and learning what the text was talking about. Now, so this is the primary part that I want to talk about, is because there was this awakening, and it lasted some years. It's still happening to me, but it was a period where all of a sudden I kept going, aha, well, wait, stop. Where did that come from? And I was learning things that I never knew were in there. And these were life changing. This didn't have so much to do with sobriety. This has everything to do with my mental health and my ability to function. It was a big deal. So one of the first things that happened on this thing is that well, all right. Before I set that up, let me do this real quick. If you got a big book, don't worry about it. I'm going to read a little piece out here. I'm going to read. I just picked one piece of promises that I want to talk about, and over on page 75, the fifth step promises. I'm going to skip down just a little bit on this thing. Now, this is real short, but while I'm reading it, see if you can reflect for a minute. It has this manifested in your life this way or not, and we'll see. It's interesting. For so long, uh, it didn't, and then all of a sudden it started to. And it's like once you begin to see the hand of God and the things that happen, you can't unsee it, which is just sort of pretty special. I'm skipping down a little bit. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Hold your finger right there. How many of y'all have been in sobriety and still unable to be alone at perfect peace and ease? You're still an agitated wreck. Probably not. Maybe some of you. Yale is. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. Now, we may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. Holy cow. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we're on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. God, this is heady stuff. What we're talking about right here. So I get over there. This sets a new baseline. As I began to read this, I'm going, wait. I'm not just here to stay sober one day at a time. I'm here to have the experience so that makes sense to me. And there is a world of difference between the two. Well, one of the first things that happened after I got hooked up with Clifford, and his sponsor was Joe McQuaney of Joe and Charlie. If some of you have listened to some of those talks, and the when I got hooked up with him, one of the first things that I did, Clifford said, there's some talks out there you might ought to listen to, and one of these talks was a guy named Don Pritz, and Don said in one of the talks that he did in the late 70s or early 80s, I've not been able to track it down right. But he sobered up in the federal penitentiary system in Denver, Colorado, and he got out and started a bunch of book studies out by Denver. But in one of those talks, he said, "I'm concerned that these days we seem to talk more and more about sobriety and less about recovery." Now, guys, when I first listened to it, y'all, it didn't mean anything to me. It just went in one ear and out the other ear. And later, I listened to it again, and I went, "Oh, wait, that that's saying a lot because there's a world of difference." Look at how many times in the basic text they talk about recovery, recovered. I mean, guys, I could tell you hundreds of stories of early AA people who always referred to themselves as recovered and always understood what they were heading towards because they understood what recovery was. It wasn't this just simply we're lollygagging through our life, just trying to stay sober one day at a time. In the words of my friend Mickey Bush out in California, so's the cat. I mean, after a while, the sobriety stuff becomes less and less important, and the recovery stuff becomes more and more important because we begin to see that there's something truly worth working for and moving for and praying for and doing what all is it's necessary. Um, One of the other things that was super important on this stuff um, was the understanding that recovery, uh, aka the steps, is a race. And people say, no, it's not. We can take our time. But let me tell you, this is one of the early things that I realized in my quest, in my journey through the big book, is that over and over and over again, they lined us up with this same idea that once we got sober, we needed to move in a timely fashion. I'm not trying to shove big book up somebody's you know what. I'm just saying if you want to sit around for weeks and months and years before you do the steps, rock on. But you're going to end up, I'm telling you, as a guy who lived that nightmare, that's where you're going to end up. Look at the big book, look at the text, the way they talk about it. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action. Next, next, next. Over and over, it keeps saying it. There is a timeliness to this thing. Because at the core of all of this, you've got something fighting against you, and that's willingness. Y'all, let me ask you a question. How many of y'all have ever been willing at one point, truly willing to do something, and then 2 weeks later you're sitting there scratching, going, it's not that big a deal. I don't really need to do that like that. The mistakes I made, I just needed a better girlfriend, or I just needed a bigger pickup truck, or I needed a more Bluebell ice cream. I don't know. I mean, we got a head full of things that we could throw in there like this. Willingness is fleeting. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of men coming out of treatment and in halfway houses and this sort of thing. And I'm telling you, you let them sit for a little bit and they will eventually, quickly, it's surprising how quick they'll turn another direction and decide that they made too big a deal out of it and they just need to start making better decisions and they'll be okay. It's much, much better to snag them early and get them on through this work so they can have this experience. Pull them with the vision of how amazing this program is in all areas of our life, which is pretty cool. I guess I'm a walking picture that the meeting thing might be questionable. I'm never saying don't go to meetings. Not ever would I even imply that. I'm just saying that if your schedule lets you go to 3 meetings a day, go. But if you think that going to a bunch of meetings is going to keep you sober, I worry about you, buddy, because what's going to happen is that you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're going to feel like recovery, this idea of sobriety is going to be a burden. You're going to carry it on your shoulders and you're just going to be weighed down by it like this. And pretty soon, the thought of going to a meeting will be the farthest thing from your mind, and you will go, I'll do anything not to have to go sit with those folks. And I've been there. I mean, I'm a poster boy of that thought process. And I just simply, so what's the solution? The solution is as quick as you can, grab a book, grab some folks to sponsor, grab some people that know and understand what you're talking about, and then go teach it, go help folks, and you'll see a life-changing deal. Yes, there's meetings involved, but it's not all attached just to that. And we understand that kind of stuff. Um, this will seem kind of weird. Next one that I want to talk about, it'll seem it was a real aha moment for me because I always bought into the idea that AA is the same everywhere you go. I used to hear people say that. I used to believe it. And then came a season in my life, about 28 years, where I was traveling every other weekend to someplace else, Europe, Australia. I mean, um, and what I began to find out was geographically, I traveled all over the United States, and I'd find places where geographically people were completely detached from the basic text, from anything written in literature. They were just attached. We just shared our experience, strength, and hope, and that's it. The problem with that is that it's also full of a great deal of confusion. And so this aha moment for me is when I connected that, wait a minute, maybe we need to pay attention to what we're teaching and what's going on. No, since Zoom stuff started in COVID, early COVID days like that, I've been asked a bunch of times to do talks, but I've been asked 3 different times to do talks, but could you not talk about God? we want you to come and visit, but we appreciate you doing that. But could you just maybe not talk about God? Now, why would I do that? Why would I do that? I'm a member of a program, a member of a fellowship that is centered around a program that is centered around a relationship with our Creator. Why would I not do that like that? What else can I offer those folks that I'm talking about? Needless to say, in all three cases, I turned it down and just said I can't do it. And this is why I was clear. I wasn't trying to be a jerk. I just like, come on. My story is not that fascinating. I don't want to. I want to get through the story as quick as I can so I can talk about the common solution. That's the stuff that I want to talk about. Like that. That's where all the good stuff is. Like it is. Two things that Clifford and Joe McQuaney, Joe would come down from Arkansas and stay with Clifford, and so a lot of times I'd spend time talking to both of them at the same time, and it's like if you can imagine what it's like to talk to your sponsor by himself, that's one thing, especially because he was a big book guy. It was special. But if you get Joe McQuaney in there, I felt like I was getting the crap kicked out of me every time I went in there like that because they were both focused on me and asking me questions that made me feel real uncomfortable like that. Joe said one evening we were sitting there talking, and he said, Myers, you always seem to make AA complicated. I always get the impression that you're trying to, and I'm going, well, dude, it is. It is complicated. And he goes, well, and I remember him looking over my shoulder at Clifford that was just walking up with a cup of coffee, and Clifford looked at me and kind of went, like I don't know what to do with him. Maybe we ought to throw him outside now. Well, what I was trying to, it just seemed convoluted. I hadn't connected all the dots yet. But so I asked Joe, I said, Joe, what is it that's simple? What is it you're talking about? And he said, Myers. This thing boils down always to two things: time with God and time with God's kids. And I said, wait a minute. You're talking about step 11 and step 12. And he smiled at Clifford and he laughed and he said, see, he's not stupid. He understands this stuff a little bit like that. But what it did was it made me stop and think about what it was that they were talking about. Y'all, I know you. I'm glad y'all are sitting down because y'all would fall down if I told you this. It embarrasses me every time I say it like this. I was 10 years sober before I sponsored the first guy that I ever sponsored in AA. I was 10 years sober, one day at a time kind of guy. I was 3 years at that book study, and in that book study, I'm still pushing back like that and this kind of stuff. Daryl was in the first AA meeting that I was at that book study. And all I knew how to do was just share. So every time we were in a heads up book study, read the page, talk about what's on the page. And I always kept raise my hand going, oh, Daryl, I want to, oh. And Daryl would try to ignore me, but every once in a while she had no choice, but she'd call on me. And then as soon as I talked, she'd roll her eyes and put her head down on the table. And it was like, God, if you'll please kill that kid, just get him out of here like that. Because I was a disruptive mess. I didn't understand that there was more here than just sharing some story or some opinions or some ideas. I didn't understand. And it wasn't until that clicked and I finally realized, hey, wait a minute. There's another time, there's another meeting that I could share that stuff. Seriously. But in this book study, let's stay focused on what we're studying. And so I did, and everything shifted. And the moment it shifted, I remember going home one night and I walked in the front door and Londa's looking at me. My wife is looking at me and she kind of tilts her head. Y'all ever see a collie dog or a dog like that that's not trying to understand? She just tilted her head a little bit like that. And she looked at me and she said, I don't know what y'all are doing at that meeting, but whatever it is, don't stop. Please don't stop. And I remember going, yes, ma'am, that's a can do. I'm on it. And because everything began to change. Time with God and time with God's kids is paramount. How much time are you spending with your Creator? I've sponsored hundreds of men over the years who say, God help me today, as they're backing out of the driveway in their pickup. They don't understand what the text was talking about. We need to be spending time in a relationship. If you don't spend time with somebody, how do you build a relationship? if you got to start someplace, but after you start, if you ask somebody out for a date, you can hey across and hey like this, and you go out on a date like that. But if the relationship is going to grow, you got to spend time there. And it's exactly the same thing with our relationship with God. And sometimes you have to tell everybody else to go piss off. I mean, you have to just say, get away. I got to have some time here to sit and be okay. That kind of stuff is really important. Um, Quiet time without running my little yap. I don't need to talk. God knows what's going on, but could I just sit still with God? This is big stuff. Um, and then once I started sponsoring guys, then it just got better and better and better. And it just was one of those kind of things where I couldn't fathom what it would be like to not have a bunch of guys that were on the same path and watch them sponsor people and watch those guys sponsor people. And pretty soon you've got this whole army of little guys excited about the fact that what they're carrying is, yes, some story, but then they're carrying some common solution of how to get from point A to point B, and that's fascinating when you see it. You'll never doubt the power of this program once you see it manifest hundreds of times with people that are beginning to have life-changing experiences with this stuff. Um, I want to tell you a real quick story. There was a guy in a meeting one night that he's about 19 or 20 years old, and he said, well, I was talking to Big Homie this morning, and I kind of went like, "What? What?" And that's what he called God, Big Homie. I don't know. But he in the conversation he said, my sponsor said, if God was your girlfriend, would she be happy with how much time you're spending with her? And it made me smile, and because I kind of went, I get that. It makes sense. It makes sense. The other thing in that same meeting that really blew me away was Clifford and Joe McQuaney said, Myers, he said, there's a magic time in AA when you realize on a visceral level, on a gut level, that you are here to feed, not be fed. So hear me out. How many of us, and I'm that guy. I mean, how many of us would go to a meeting, find our homeboys and girls, hang out with them, hang out in the butt hut, play outside, do whatever, go to a meeting, texting people across the room. I mean, we're just playing games as we sit there in that meeting like this. We don't realize how distracting we are, but we don't realize that nowhere in our basic text did it say we're supposed to go to a meeting and be fed. How many times have we heard people say, I need a meeting today so badly? Maybe somebody will say something I could use or something to that effect. The reality of this stuff is we're there to feed, not be fed. It has nothing to do with me. I'll get fed anyway. It comes in through the back door, and we just all of a sudden we realize that it's happening like that. But my job, the moment I get there, is to feed, to try to help somebody have this experience. Guys, statistically, we think that everybody that gets out of treatment is coming to AA, that everybody that's struggling is going to come to AA. And the reality of it is, statistically, that's not true. This is the reason why the word approached is used so many times in the basic text. In the big book, guys, they didn't have a bunch of meetings when the big book was written. They went and got them. And this idea of carrying a message, this idea of going to hospitals and jails and treatment centers and wind-up joints and carrying a clear message of recovery is transformational. It changes everything about how you look at this deal. The miracle necessarily doesn't always happen right there in the meeting. The miracle stuff happens as we talk to people, pick up a phone at 10 o'clock at night when we don't want to. Do the things that we're supposed to do like that. Let me make a fast suggestion like this. I need to wrap this up here. We don't run over time. The next time you're sitting in a meeting, if I could just go click and change something within you, what I would want to do is I would want to go click, and all of a sudden you began to look at everybody in the room as a prospect of somebody that you could help. Because the reality of this is that there's so many people sitting in meetings that are uncomfortable. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to expect. I mean, stop and think about this. How many times do people come to our fellowship, sit there? They don't even know what the program is. They don't even know what recovery looks like. And yet we just ignore them and let them, maybe they'll work the steps, maybe they'll have the experience, maybe they'll this like, instead of doing that, how about we look around the room and look for anybody in that room that's uncomfortable? You know how I always know that they're uncomfortable? If you're reading a big book before the meeting, sitting in a meeting, they're uncomfortable. Nobody goes to a meeting to read a big book before the meeting. They're just sitting there by themselves, uncomfortable like that. So I walk up to them, and this is so stupid. I hate to even talk about it like this, but it's real. I walk up and I go, "Hey, that's a pretty cool book you're reading. Hey, what's your favorite part?" And they'll look at me like, and it's like they'll go, well, I don't know. I just got out of treatment 2 days ago, and I really don't really know. No kidding. Hey, let me tell you what my favorite part is, and I'll take their book and I'll turn over to page 44, the first page, the first paragraph of Agnostics, and it where it says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. That little piece right there, I'm qualifying them. They don't even know I'm qualifying them, but I am. It's two questions in one sentence that's about choice and control, it's a perfect place to have a little convo and talk a little bit. And then I'll say, hey, this meeting's getting to be real big in a minute. You want to sit over with me? And if you're not waiting for anybody, just come sit with me and I'll help you figure out what's going on, because this book study can be a little bit intimidating in the beginning. In those days, there were 220 people there on a Tuesday night in that book study. And so then I'd look around the room for somebody else, and I'd look around the room for somebody else, and pretty soon I'll have 3 or 4 people sitting with me that were brand new, that are sitting there, and guess who their new homeboy is? Me, me. And I got them real close, and I can hold them and hug on them and help them understand as quickly as I can why they're there and what's in the future. What is it that we're moving towards? Because without that, Ah, I don't know. Y'all understand what I'm saying. Some of you do understand exactly what I'm saying. I just like I've watched hundreds of people come into meetings when I'm traveling, and I'm sitting in meetings before our conference or something, and I watch people come in, and I close my eyes. I've become hypersensitive to what people say in meetings, and I listen to people talk about things that are important, but not about recovery. There may be things that should be shared with a sponsor about job stuff and about the other kind of stuff. But what about what is it that would help me paint a picture of what a future looks like after having this spiritual awakening? How could I do that? And I think more people would stay if they understood. Statistically, this is where we struggle. We don't have problems having people come to us. We have problems getting people to stay. And somewhere along the line, we need to be able to just look at what we're doing and ask ourselves some hard questions. Am I being helpful in doing what I'm doing? Most of you are. I'm just saying that you may be in one of those places where the geographics are different. I'll say this because I have a wife and 3 daughters that I adore. So I'm kicking open the door in girl territory. Let me tell you, the one thing I've noticed about women over the years is that there are some women who are amazingly strong and amazingly willing to help other women. And I've met thousands that don't give a rat's fuzzy rear about anybody in the room. And I'm not being mean. I'm just saying that's based on an experience like that. How do I know? I've been to hundreds and hundreds of conferences all over the world, and I'm watching how many women are in there and how many women are sponsoring people like that. I've seen dozens of situations where one gal in one area geographically in one county is sponsoring women in 3 counties because nobody else will step up. Nobody else will do it. And I've never understood why, but I'm telling you, you think guys need help, man, girls are times 10, needs people that are willing to carry a clear message and be there for that deal like that. I'm not trying to spank anybody, y'all. Um, it's just something to think about and to see. The let me talk about let's talk for just a second about some solutions to this stuff. The if work and self-sacrifice for others is the most talked about reoccurring theme in the big book. It's over and over and over and over again like this. Then the hard questions we need to ask ourselves is what am I doing to help? What am I doing to carry a clear message? Well, in order to do that, we have to understand what the clear message is. It's when I talk at treatment centers, it's one of the funnest things I do. I ask them in the United States, the U.S. version of the big book, page 17, talks about a common peril and then the common solution. It's right underneath it like that. The common peril is our story. If I met Michael John tonight and we were just visiting for the first time like that, I've got to tell him some story. I'm going to tell him about some crazy stuff and he's going to say something. And in a short period of time, we understand completely what it's like to carry the shame and guilt and remorse and all the things that we carry. That's for sure. But at some point in time, I need to quit with the story and I need to slide into the solution. Now, here's where the rub comes, though. If I don't understand the solution, then all I'm going to end up doing is falling back over and over back into the story again. That's the reason the original home group I was at with 32 meetings a week, and they're all discussion meetings. You see, it's troublesome. It's troublesome. No literature-based meetings, so we couldn't study. We didn't do that. Nobody was saying, "Hey, you need to understand what these steps are," the way it's laid out in the text. Let me tell you another thing too. If you go back and you look at the very end of the big book, and you not the story part of it, but the first 164 pages like this, and you began to look at the stories that Bill puts in there in the end and a vision for you. There's stories where they 12-step Bill Dotson. There's another story in there too, like that. But in all of these stories, what they say over and over again is they meet the guy, they tell him stories, and then they get into the solution. And in Dotson's story, he's the second day in the hospital. He listened to him. They gave him the book to read. He reads it. He goes back and he goes, "Hey, this is pretty cool. I understand. I'm willing to do whatever." And then the third day, he gave his life to the care of God, and he's hitting the road. 3 days into the deal, not 3 months, not 3 years, 3 days. Look at Jim's story and Fred's story in the front of the book, and There's a Solution and More About Alcoholism. Look at those two stories, and there's something in there they repeated exactly the same. In both of those stories, Jim's story and Fred's story, it says, we met them up again. They crashed and burned. We met them up with them again. The AA guys get together and they sit with them like this. And then they said, the second time that they meet them, they said, we told them what we knew about alcoholism. It didn't say we told them our story again. It said we told them what we knew about alcoholism. So what they were doing was the second time that they talked to these guys, they were carrying a clear message of what it is that they were supposed to be doing. And that kind of clarity is huge. It's huge. Over and over and over again, they would do this. If you go back and you read the life of Clarence Snyder, there was a book, Mitchell Kay wrote a book called How It Worked. It's fascinating book about the early days of AA. And Clarence Snyder was sponsored by Dr. Bob. And when you read the stories, and you look at the growth, the birth of AA in Detroit and Cleveland and Akron, and then later in New York, we were talking about these things, and what you're always blown away with is the common piece of information that they weren't sitting around waiting for days and days and days and months and months and months. They weren't doing that. They were working these guys and gals through the work quickly, so that they would have this experience, so they could join them and carry that clear message of recovery. If it's the one thing I wish I could change in retrospect, I just wish I could change that idea that we have an unlimited amount of time to get this. If you hang around long enough, you'll hear what you need to hear. I used to say that all the time too, and now I wish I'd never said it. because the reality of this stuff is that you may not hear what you need to hear. You might not. And God love you. I just, there is a life ahead of us. There's a life in front of us in recovery that is so transformational. It's so completely different that I just am blown away. I love the fact that I'm sober today. I love the fact that I don't have to go to any goofy place and buy a bunch of booze and lie my teeth off again. I'm glad I don't have to live that life. But I am much more grateful for the fact that a crusty old bastard from Central Texas could affect change in the lives of other people, not because I'm smart, not because I'm witty, not because I'm any of those things. It's because I followed some directions and I had an experience, and I didn't have to be unique. All I had to do was have my story ready and waiting, and then have a solution ready and waiting, so that I could carry that folks through this little process of getting all the stuff out of their life, so they could see who they really are, and then we're all set. Um, do me a solid, if you would, please. Just tonight, when you all get a chance to go to bed, um, sit for a minute and ask yourself, as I read the promises in the big book, are the promises rhetorical in nature? I'm just reading them to read them, or are they real? Have they begun to manifest in my life? And if they have, great. If they haven't, great. Because at least you know where you are. It's the mind game that we play. I've been sober for 10 years and you're still a nuttier than a squirrel turd. I mean, there's a, y'all get that, right? Just because you're sober doesn't mean that you're mentally okay. It doesn't mean that you're on a spiritual path. It doesn't mean that you're effective in helping anybody else. That's what the steps were all about. Maybe it's time to go back through the steps a little bit. Maybe it's time to look and see who we really are. Because once these promises start to materialize, they start to manifest in your life. What you'll never be able to unsee it again. You'll be blown away. And let me tell you who else, real quick, who's affected. Your family will be nuts over it. They'll be crazy thinking about it, because all of a sudden this stage character that walked in years ago is no longer a stage character. I can be authentic. I can be real. I can be kind and generous and all these things that I couldn't be before. And this is the stuff that makes all the difference in the whole wide world. I mean, this is big. This is big old stuff like that. Think about the promises. Thing two, I promise you I'll shut up. Go read in the big book, From the ABCs to the Third Step Prayer. You got 2.5 pages there where Bill Wilson stops talking about alcoholism completely. He never mentions it. What he talks about is this idea that we're selfish and self-centered, and that maybe we're a stage character. Maybe we are the actor that wants to run the whole show. But listen, y'all, until you see it, when I finally opened my eyes and realized, sober a bunch of years, that I'm still a stage character, that I'm still playing games, I felt like I'd been bitch slapped. I felt like who am I? I'm a phony. I'm a stage character. And once I began to realize that, I could go back through inventory and look at that, and I could realize that there are some things still in my life that's objectionable. And when I get to 6 and 7, I can ask God to remove those things that I don't want to be a part of. I don't want to be a phony. I don't want to be that guy. I want to be as authentic as I possibly can be. And with that, I think this crusty old guy will hush up, and thank you again for letting me come and visit y'all.
Thank you so much, Myers. And I'm going to ask now everybody to unmute, and so we can all thank the speaker.
Thank you, Myers.
It's so wonderful to hear you.
You
Pleasure.
Great chair.
All the way from the UK.
Phenomenal, Myers. Phenomenal.
Thanks, little pig.
Thanks, Nutty.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. And apologies. Oh, in line with our tradition 7, every AA group should be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. Please make contributions to our meeting PayPal account, which will be posted in the chat again. And at this point, I'd like to call Maya for any announcements. Or do we have any announcements from anybody?
Yeah, we do. Thank you so much, Carolina, for taking the meeting, and everyone on the crew in the background doing service. Myers, thank you so much for your share. We are back here on Wednesday. We have an online step meeting. We are on step 3, and we have Louise from Los Angeles, and he will be here on Wednesday at the slightly later time of 8 p.m. UK, US times.